Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, I want to discuss diminishing returns, as it came up, of course, in discussion. We're going to go over one large comment, basically, as provided by someone. They have written basically up all of the points that usually get brought up for the use of return to scale, which is an economic term. And I will go into why I disagree with using that term for video games. And I was always very confused why people brought it up, as I haven't seen it really outside of the realm of division content to see people bring that up. I've seen it before in Eve, but even there, it gets like squished down quite quickly when it comes to the calculation side of the damage. On the economic terms of it, that very much applies. And yeah, we'll go into four pieces actually, where I'll go 4 chapters, where first I'll discuss why I do believe it is semantics, as in the comment it strongly implies that it isn't about semantics, but I'll go into why yes, I would say it is. Then we'll go into the 2 terms that often come up with this discussion, which is returns to scale, which is what people believe it to be. I'll go over why it's silly to try to think of that in that way, and why also, even if you wanted to, it's diminishing returns to scale. So diminishing returns is an apt name for it. We'll go over the marginal product, because usually they refer to or attempt to refer towards diminishing marginal returns, which is usually the economic term that goes along with this. And I'll discuss why there is no marginal product here. So you can't actually, this is not in reference to a pure calculation system, why that calculation makes no sense to even have in here. And then we'll go actually into what I would consider it to be, which is in a mathematics sense, which is a diminishing return to the final percentual increase, which is how I would describe it. And we'll go through all of those. So yeah, let's hop into it with some semantics. And the comment I'll be using for this discussion is actually provided to us by Vilandesh. I'm gonna assume I may be butchering that name, but it is underneath the weapon damage calculation part 2 video, and it goes pretty in depth, and especially there's a whole area of calculating out the marginal product, which I feel always comes up with this discussion, and also like how to calculate the marginal products. We'll go into why I wouldn't ever really. I have it as well just here, separated that, so it's a little bit easier and I don't accidentally scroll off of it. And yeah, very much, I would say, don't, of course, like, I disagree with this person, but this person is not wrong. They have at least very much spent some time and gone over why they believe it to be this way. I just only disagree with them. I will go into why. We'll go over all of the points. And I very much prefer a response like this when they want to say I'm wrong, over something stupid like this, where they just go, you are incorrect. Like, I have no time for a person like this. Just they can go and, you know, have intercourse with themselves. So yeah, let's forget about people like that and go after people that are actually somewhat knowledgeable, although they are, as we'll go into, I would disagree with them. So here, as I start off as well here, disclaimer, this is only attack on the argument diminishing returns. I made this mistake too, but then I researched. I know what you're going for, but this is not diminishing marginal returns. This is the point where basically this discussion diverges from diminishing returns to marginal returns. And we'll actually read this entire quote, and then we'll come back to it, why I'm firstly wanting to talk semantics. But yeah, this is not diminishing marginal returns. It's returns to scale. Quote from Todco, what is returns to scale economics? The marginal products are calculated by adding 1 unit of either labor or capital and keeping the other inputs the same, whereas returns to scales refer to what happens when all inputs productions are scaled up. Then it goes into some calculations here. V2 is better, but that does mean that it has diminishing returns, the law of diminishing marginal returns as well. The law of diminishing marginal returns. Economic laws, I would not consider laws. They do use the term, but they are quite different than mathematical or scientific laws. It's not semantics, for God's sakes. There can't be different opinions on it. This part is the only part where I would say they are actually factually wrong, because as we'll go into, there can be different opinions on it. Mostly because I don't take any of this to be gospel. This is economics, and we'll come back to that in a second. And yeah, I have actually read parts of this thought code, and it is very much, and as well, Economics Fun is a good economics channel. But again, all of this is economics. So yeah, let's go into semantics. Where did this marginal come from? Diminishing marginal returns. I was talking about diminishing returns. That is how I defined the term. I did not define it further. I did so on purpose because we were discussing a specific thing, which is the final outcome. In all of the parts that we were talking about, the numbers is all about final outcomes. So there can be no, in the same way that if you, for instance, use energy, within the context of the conversation, you can usually guess what energy is being talked about. If you're talking chemistry, it's going to be chemical energy. If it's going to be physics, it might be potential or kinetic. So then there might be some definitions required. If you're talking about electrical systems, it's going to be electrical energy. You don't need to define your terms when they're basically that clear. So when I was talking about diminishing returns, I was talking about diminishing returns to the final percentual outcome. This marginal is an economic term. So we've brought it for some reason to economics here. And I disagree with that. Economics has no place here. This isn't an economic system that we're discussing. We're talking about a mathematical calculation system. Marginal returns are of no factual here because even as we'll go in a second in the marginal part, yes, there are no marginal decreases because they're not marginal returns. It's not a marginal product to begin with. Returns to scale, even if you wanted to use that, it would be diminishing returns to scale because you can have increasing, neutral, or decreasing returns to scale. Decreasing and diminishing are interchangeable as terms. And all of this still is just economics. Why did we go into economics? And that's why this is a conversation in semantics, because I will not let economics just come in here and step all over this. So yeah, let's move on to returns to scale. And to first somewhat describe what returns to scales are, because it is an economic term, so you either know it or you don't, unless it's defined for you. And it's a term that refers to the proportionality of changes in output after the amounts of all inputs in production have been changed by the same factor. Although actually this isn't the best description. Usually what it basically is the calculation at the point of scale. And scale is basically the final point of production. These are all terms about production. And that's also the reason why marginal product will fail in a second. But what we can see here is actually, there are descriptors for them as towards if they're increasing, staying neutral or constant, or decreasing or diminishing. And it is basically a calculation system towards the final output. So it isn't about the product within the system, but the final output. And that's the part where they overlap. That's really the only reason why it gets brought up. Because if we go back to this one spreadsheet that I made for that video, and we discuss it here, basically what the marginal product is this first bar, where we're just adding in a number, and that's end up being that, and we'll go into marginal product in a second. Return to scale within that system, if you were to overlap these two, the returns to scale would overlap with the actual increase versus stat, as I have it as the last stat. So what is the actual percentual increase? But just because they overlap does not mean that they have anything to do with each other, because one is for economic system, the other we're just talking about a mathematical system. The mathematical system does not have variability of economics in it. And on top of that, even if you wanted to discuss that in the terms of returns to scale, there is still a descriptor that you could add in there of diminishing, which would not be out of place at all. I'm calling it diminishing returns to scale, because we only ever have diminishing returns to scale because we always have that representation of base in there counting at the 100% point, meaning that when we look at, for instance, here where there is an increasing and then it flattens out, we never, ever are below diminishing returns on returns to scale. We also don't ever cross into negative returns to scale, so we're not discussing that either. But we're basically never going to be either just neutral or increasing returns to scale. So it's only ever diminishing returns to scale. At that point as well, it's a moot point because the word diminishing return is there. Just to scale is left out because to scale is an economic term, and why are we using it here? Let's move on to marginal product and talk about why that actually even just isn't here. And yeah, let's take a few examples here of marginal product. And actually, this is an apt one. And yeah, what the marginal product is the product of when you add in a form of labor, or usually it's labor. Machinery could also be in here. But what you have in real life is if you have, as for instance here, it goes from 1 person and 3 product being the increase, and then going from to 2 and it being 8 because you're now making full use of what is available, and it goes up still even by 3. By 4 it starts falling away and decreasing. The marginal product, which is basically the second derivative of these numbers. And this is, of course, a function of real life. The more people you add, unless you as well increase the machinery and stuff to increase the scale, which is where that comes from, then if you're only increasing labor, your marginal or total product here is increasing with a marginal product that is less than the increase in labor. And that is what marginal product is. So it will also always just kind of go up and then come down. That's also why we have increasing and decreasing. And the law of diminishing returns of this is that it will eventually hit a diminishing point, a point where you will start to get less returns. Now, if we go back to that initial comment as it is here, so we're going to go through this. If you want to know if your production has diminishing marginal returns, well, there is no production here and there are no marginal returns where we'll go into it. You have to calculate the marginal product. The marginal product, labor, is delta total output over delta labor. So basically, what is your increase over what you got, added into the stat. And remember again that we're discussing this at basically the stat point. So if we add 5 to here, does it increase by 5? And of course, at this point at the start, it does, because there is nothing interfering with this. This isn't labor or anything. When we add in 5, we just add in 5. So if we go back into here and we start going into, and I won't go into this entire calculation, although they've defined the terms and stuff, so it's all good. It's all well put together. So if we were to actually do the calculation and put them together, although as you can see here, basically what they've done is put in the function of, basically if you boil this down, if you add a number to a stat, how much does it go up by? And as I talk about here, definition of a straight upward angled line, ergo no diminishing returns. Yes, there isn't diminishing returns at the points of stats. Basically, this whole calculation part here could be simplified, especially these final parts. And of course, here again, BD is the constant, no diminishing returns. Yes, at the stat point, there is no diminishing return. When you add 10 to weapon damage, it goes up by 10. You don't need this entire thing to calculate that out. This is actually quite silly. You don't need, because there's never going to be a marginality there because it isn't a product of labor where it is diminishing because forces outside are, there isn't enough machinery, there isn't enough people, you hired lazy people or something like that. That there are no outside forces influencing this. There is no variable outside of adding the 10 adds the 10. So you don't need all this, but that also means that it's not a marginal product because it's, as they themselves say, there is no diminishing returns. It is a linear line or straight upwards angled line, ergo no diminishing returns. How does that fit this? Because marginality basically requires it to fit this. So it's breaking the law of diminishing returns, of diminishing marginal returns, by not being diminishing at some point. This product has nothing to do with anything we care about. We don't care about the labor. We don't care that the stat goes up by 10 if we add 10. That is not the point we care about. So we're not discussing that at all. On top of that, there is no marginal product. The product is just not marginal. It's just the product. When you add 10 to a stat, it goes up by 10. Yes. We didn't need all of this discussion to have that discussion because these aren't economic systems or production systems. It's a mathematical system. When you just add 10 and there is no variable interfering there, it's going to go up by 10. And that brings me basically to the point I want to discuss as to what I would say it is. And that is that the words diminishing returns can be used without the term marginal in there or to scale, or the way I use them without any other word there. And it can just be returns that are diminished per point. So what we get when we add 10 weapon damage at going from, in this case, from 100 to, or well, 5 in this case actually, adding 5 to 100 weapon damage, what do we get? Do we get back the full 5% that we added in, or the 5 that we added in? No, we get in back 2.5, meaning that we put in a number and we got a return that is diminished. That's all that needs to be there for diminishing returns to be as a term. Not, of course, in returns to scale or diminishing marginal returns, but just diminishing returns. Just the returns are diminished. That's all you need for that. It doesn't need to be couched in economics. It doesn't need to agree with any economics or any such thing. And if we want to define it, what I would say it is a diminishing return to the percentage, to a percentual increase. And as that, it is a valid term. And within mathematics, we can just use it as that because it defines to what the returns is diminishing. We don't need to bring in economics into all of this. We'd rather not even, because the scale of economics doesn't really apply well here. Marginal returns here as well there isn't, because there's no marginal product. The product that comes out of that system is inherently not marginal. So I have no idea why people want to go that route. And yeah, that basically sums up my takes on this. As yeah, we basically I consider this completely to be semantics, and this person, of course, disagrees with that. But yeah, I used the term diminishing returns, and I will continue to do so because I'm not talking economics, I'm talking mathematics. And so we conclude this basically as a little bit of a shorter one, but yeah, I hope a little bit packed with some thinking. And yeah, I would actually, for once here, I'll go the YouTuber route of going, I want to hear what you guys may have to say. As do you agree or disagree with me, or would you rather use the economic systems? If so, why? If the mathematical system, if so, why? And at the very least, this is an interesting discussion to have, I feel. Although I feel it's very much, even if you want to couch it in the economic sense, these are then diminishing returns to scale. And at that point, they're just diminishing returns as well. And to me, it's economics has no place here. This isn't an economic system, in my view. Trying to match it up leads to silly results, I feel. But yeah, for my future video, next up is the build showcase for weird tech tanks, and we'll go into that. I'm working on the burst DPS, sustained DPS, and damage per mag video and guide together, of course, in the background. So those will be coming up, hopefully not too long after this one. And yeah, we'll go as well into maybe going after some of the recent issues that have crept up within the community with some for no particular reasons. But yeah, those are all in the future. So yeah, I hope you either join me for those or over on Twitch, where I'm often streaming. And as always, have a good night.